Alina Serrano thought she was taking a personal day for a family celebration. She didn't know she was taking it to drive 45 minutes to a wedding venue, walk up to the entrance in a new dress, and hear her own mother say you weren't invited. And she definitely didn't know that 3 days later, that same family would send her a bill for $25,000 for a party she wasn't allowed through the door of. This is the story of what she did next. She had bought the dark green dress back in July, the same week her mother called. Linda hadn't exactly invited her to Aaron's wedding. She had mentioned it the way she mentioned most things, as information being transferred rather than an invitation being extended. Aaron was getting married in September. Private estate in the Willamette Valley. Ceremony at 6. Then she moved on to something else. Alina had waited a beat, asked a few quiet questions. 45 minutes south of Portland, Linda said. Beautiful place, good catering. Then the call ended. She had not been told to come. She had also not been told to stay home. And in the space between those two things, she had lived for most of her life. That was how it worked in her family. Her father Gary never called first, but that was just how he was not a phone person. Aaron had forgotten her birthday 3 years running, but he was busy, he meant well. Linda passed along information without warmth, but she was reserved, that was her way. Alina had spent 29 years building small, reasonable explanations for every gap, every silence, every absence. She had practiced long enough that the explanations came automatically, before the hurt even had a chance to register. So she bought the dress. $240, dark green silk, thin-strapped, found at a boutique on Northwest 23rd during a lunch break she hadn't planned to extend. She booked a hairdresser 2 weeks out. Took a personal day on Friday to get her nails done. Set her alarm for 8 on Saturday, even though she wouldn't need to leave until close to 5. That morning she made coffee and stood at her living room window watching the courtyard below. September in Portland was still warm, the kind of warm that felt borrowed. She got dressed slowly, the dress, then the gold pendant necklace she had bought herself for her 28th birthday, the one her family had let pass without a call. Small heels, worn enough to be comfortable. She stood in front of the mirror, looked at the woman looking back at her, and said quietly, "Everything's fine. Hope doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just shows up as a dress you bought too fast, and a morning you couldn't sleep through." She wore it like it cost nothing. It would cost her everything before the day was over. She drove south on I-5 as the city gave way to open sky. The estate was everything a venue website promises and rarely delivers. Stone path up from the parking lot, white lights strung through the trees, the kind of place where someone spent real money making it look effortless. The lot was nearly full when Alina pulled in just before 6. Music drifted from somewhere inside, something soft, instrumental, the kind that tells arriving guests the evening has already begun without them. She fixed her dress, getting out of the car, took a breath of air that smelled like cut grass and something faintly floral. Started up the path toward the entrance. Her parents were standing outside, not inside greeting guests, not at a table with drinks. On the steps in front of the main entrance, standing close together, and when Alina raised one hand in a wave and kept walking toward them, Linda saw her first. Her mother's face didn't open. It closed. Something behind her eyes went flat and deliberate, and she stepped forward, not with her arms out, but with her body positioned to block the door. "What are you doing here?" Linda said. "You weren't invited." The words came out quietly. Not hissed, not shouted, not broken up by any visible emotion. They had the register of someone informing a stranger that the restaurant was closed. Transactional. Settled. Like a decision made long before tonight that required no further discussion. Gary stood just behind Linda's right shoulder. Dark suit, navy tie, slightly crooked the knot, sitting off-center in a way that suggested he had tied it himself in a hurry or in low light. He was not looking at Alina. He was looking somewhere past her left shoulder at the parking lot, the tree line, something in the middle distance that apparently required his full attention. He did not look at her once. Alina's eyes went to the tie and stayed there for a moment. Her mind needed something small to hold. "Does Aaron know I'm here?" she asked. "Aaron is busy," Linda said. "You're not on the guest list. Go home." Behind her mother, the entrance door swung open as another couple arrived. It stayed open just long enough for everything inside to spill out voices layered over each other, laughter, music a little louder now, the smell of flowers and something warm from the kitchen. Then it closed. The stone steps went quiet again. "Okay," Alina said. She turned around. Walked back down the path past the parking lot toward the road because she needed to be moving and the direction didn't particularly matter. She took out her phone and opened the rideshare app. Her hands were steady. That registered somewhere in the back of her mind as almost strange. The worst part wasn't what Linda said. It was that she hadn't bothered to say it quietly. There were other guests within earshot. It hadn't seemed to matter. Alina's ride was 6 minutes out. She stood at the edge of the lot and waited, facing away from the lights in the trees. She got home a little after 8. She hung the dark green dress on the back of her closet door instead of putting it away, set her heels by the front door, sat down on the couch and looked at the ceiling for a long time. She didn't cry. She kept waiting too, in a distant, observational way, like waiting for rain the forecast promised. It didn't come. What came instead was a stillness that had weight to it pressing down on her chest, while the apartment went dark and the neighborhood outside went quiet. Sunday, she cleaned. Not because the condo needed it, she kept a tidy place, but because her hands needed something to do while her head did what it was going to do regardless. She wiped down the kitchen counters twice, reorganized the spice rack alphabetically, which she had never done before and would probably never maintain, washed 3 mugs that were already clean, dried them carefully, put them back. At some point in the afternoon, she ended up on the bathroom floor, scrubbing grout lines with an old toothbrush. And it was only when her knees started aching that she realized how long she'd been down there. Monday, she went back to work. Her boss, Dennis, ran a tight ship with short check-ins and long to-do lists, and he had no more interest in how her weekend had gone than she had in telling him. She sat at her desk, opened her spreadsheets, took calls, sent emails. For a few hours at a stretch, she didn't think about Saturday at all. That was the most she could say for Monday, and it was enough. Tuesday evening, she picked up her phone and typed a message to Aaron. "Can we talk?" No explanation, no accusation, just the question. She sent it and put the phone face down on the counter and made dinner. When she checked it 20 minutes later, the message showed as read. He had seen it. He just hadn't answered. He didn't reply that night. He didn't reply Wednesday morning either. She had spent years being the person who found a reason to stay. A reason to keep calling, keep showing up, keep filling the silences with something generous. She had mistaken that patience for loyalty for a very long time. Wednesday morning she woke up, and before she even reached for her phone, something that had been quietly holding on inside her simply let go. Not with grief, not with anger, more like a streetlight going out on a block you've walked 100 times. One moment there's light, the next there isn't, and you didn't hear the click. You just notice after a second that it's dark. She got up, made coffee, and was sitting at the kitchen counter working through her morning emails when her phone rang. Unknown number. Portland area code. She answered it. The woman introduced herself as Karen, event coordinator, at the estate venue in the Willamette Valley. Her voice was professional and unhurried, someone who made calls like this regularly and had learned not to lead with apology. She said she was following up on the outstanding balance for the Serrano wedding banquet held that past Saturday. She asked when Alina planned to make the final payment. $25,000. Alina set her coffee cup down on the counter, slowly making sure it was flat before she let go. Then she said in a voice that came out steadier than she expected, "I'm sorry, can you say that again?" Karen said it again. $25,000, the remaining balance on the banquet contract. The contract, she explained, was in Alina's name. Full legal name, date of birth, signature, on file. "I need you to read me the contract details," Alina said. The contract number, the date it was signed, the total amount, and every name listed on the document. Karen read them out without hesitation. Alina pulled the notepad she kept by the coffee maker and wrote down each item as it came: contract number, date, total cost, remaining balance. Then the names: Aaron Serrano, Linda Serrano, and Alina Serrano, listed as secondary responsible party and emergency contact. Her brother, her mother, her name. She kept writing. "Can I ask why you're calling me specifically?" Alina said. "Why not the primary contact?" The venue had been trying to reach Aaron Serrano since Sunday morning, Karen said. He had stopped responding to calls and messages. Same with Linda Serrano. Alina's name was listed as the next contact on file. I see, Alina said. Thank you, Karen. I'll be in touch. She hung up and looked at the notepad. Neat handwriting, every line level, the figures clear. She had written it the way she would take notes in a client meeting, without letting her hand get ahead of her head. Outside the kitchen window, a neighbor was loading groceries out of her car. An ordinary Wednesday morning. The kind that doesn't announce itself as anything. Then Alina smiled. Not from amusement, not from relief. It was the smile that comes when something you couldn't quite see suddenly sharpens into focus, when the numbers add up and the answer, however ugly, is at least clear. They hadn't invited her. They had turned her away at the door in front of other guests without lowering their voices. 3 days of silence. And the whole time her name had been sitting on a contract at a venue in the Willamette Valley, signed up to cover $25,000 for a party she wasn't allowed to attend. Her presence had been optional. Her name had been essential. She picked up her phone and called her father's younger brother, the one who answered on the second ring and never told her what he didn't mean. Uncle Victor picked up before the third ring. Victor's office was on the second floor of a building on southeast Belmont that had settled over the decades into a comfortable and permanent shabbiness. The staircase creaked on the 3rd and 7th steps. No elevator. The hallway smelled like old paper and rooms where the windows didn't open easily. But the office itself was warm and ordered shelves of labeled binders on 3 walls, a heavy wooden desk with nothing on it that didn't need to be there. A single framed photo on the windowsill of a younger Victor in what looked like a uniform somewhere, with mountains in the background. He met her at the door and shook her hand. Not a hugger. She had always appreciated that about him. She sat across the desk and laid out everything she had, the notepad, the contract details Karen had read to her, the names. She went through it in order: Saturday evening, the entrance steps, her mother's words, the drive home, 3 days of silence, Aaron seeing her message and not answering, no editorializing. Just the facts delivered the way she would present a client report. Victor listened without interrupting, without shifting in his chair, without the small sympathetic sounds most people offer to prove they're paying attention. He listened until she was done. Then he opened the bottom drawer of his desk and set a manila folder on the surface between them. He had been holding something for 6 months, he said. He had planned to wait until he had more. After what she had just told him, now was the right time. Earlier that spring, a client had come in with a routine contract dispute, a small residential contractor, nothing unusual. While working through the paperwork, the client had pulled out a folder containing more than it needed to. Inside was a document that had nothing to do with the dispute, a personal guarantee agreement. The name on it was Alina Serrano. Her date of birth, her address, her signature, $8,000. Aaron had brokered the arrangement, telling the contractor that his sister had agreed to act as guarantor, that it was all sorted. Victor had not called her then because he couldn't yet establish she hadn't known. So he had started building the file instead. 6 months of being careful. He opened the folder. 4 documents in total, 3 personal guarantee and loan agreements, different lenders, varying amounts, all bearing Alina's information, and a version of her signature, plus the banquet contract from that Saturday. He walked her through the figures. The 3 loan agreements combined came to just under $9,000. The banquet contract added $25,000 on top of that. And there was one more item he needed to tell her about, the reason he had asked her to check the property records the night before. That piece brought the total liability placed in her name without her consent to approximately $43,000. Alina looked at each page without touching them. She recognized her own information in the header of every one. The signatures were close enough to pass a quick glance, not close enough to hold up under scrutiny. She told him about March. Her mother had texted asking for a photo of her driver's license, both sides. Linda said it was for a city utilities rebate program, that documentation was required from all household members, that it would only take a second. Alina had photographed it and sent it through without thinking. Less than a minute, start to finish. Victor nodded once, slowly, the nod of someone confirming what they had already suspected. That was the source. One photo sent in good faith had handed them everything: her full legal name, date of birth, current address, 6 months to work with it. The dollar amount on the page was serious, but it had a shape, and things with shapes could be dealt with. What settled heavier was something else: the plan had only worked because whoever designed it understood her. They knew she checked her bank accounts, but not her credit. Knew she paid her bills without asking questions. Knew that if something arrived quietly enough, she wouldn't pull at the thread. They had built the entire scheme on an accurate read of her character, and the most accurate part was the assumption that she would not fight back. Victor closed the folder and looked at her directly. "Do you want to file a report?" he said. "Yes," she said. "I do." He nodded, no surprise, no ceremony. He told her there was one thing to do first before they went anywhere near a precinct. He wanted her to check the Multnomah County property records for her condo, any liens or encumbrances recorded in the past 6 months. His voice, when he said it, was careful in a way that made something tighten in her chest. She asked why. He said he wanted to confirm something before he told her what he was thinking. Victor called at 7:50 the next morning. She had been up for a little while, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee she hadn't touched yet, when her phone rang. She picked it up on the second ring. "No, good morning. Open the Multnomah County property records for your condo," he said. "Look for any encumbrances recorded in the last 6 months. County Assessor's Portal public access." He would stay on the line. She opened her laptop on the kitchen table and found her unit by address. Less than 3 minutes to load the property detail page and scroll to the encumbrances section. There was a deed of trust filed in July. A private individual listed as beneficiary. Basis, a personal loan agreement. Amount secured $9,000. She read it twice. Then a third time because the first two didn't fully land. She had bought the condo 3 years ago without help, no co-signer, no family money, no one's name on the application but her own. Every mortgage payment on time, every single month. She was close enough to a third paid down that she had started running early payoff numbers in her head. It was the one thing in her life with no asterisk attached to it. No mostly or almost. Just hers, built from her own income, over 3 years of quiet, consistent work. Someone had walked into the Multnomah County Recorder's office with a forged document and pledged it as collateral for a loan she had never signed. "I see it," she said into the phone. Victor's voice didn't rise. It concentrated. Recording a lien against someone's property using a forged power of attorney was a different and more serious category than the guarantee agreement's forgery of a recorded legal instrument. Encumbrance of real property, without the owner's knowledge or consent. He used the word felony, the way he said most things without inflection. Somehow that made it land harder than if he had raised his voice. He told her to go to her parents' house that morning before anyone had time to prepare. And he told her to open the voice memo app on her phone, start a recording before she walked through the door, set the screen to dark and keep it in her jacket pocket until she was back outside. She closed the laptop, got up and dressed. Drank a full glass of water at the sink. She opened the voice memo app, started the recording, watched the timer count up, darkened the screen and put the phone in her jacket pocket. She pressed her palm flat against the outside of it for a moment, feeling the shape of it there, small and solid. Then she got in her car and drove west on Highway 26 toward Beaverton, 40 minutes. The morning was flat and grey, the kind of overcast that makes everything look like it's waiting for something to happen. She had grown up in that house. She knew which step on the front porch squeaked. She knew the smell of the hallway the moment the door opened. She drove the whole way with both hands on the wheel. Victoria answered the door. House clothes, hair pulled back expression, carrying the particular quality of someone who had been expecting a knock and had already decided how to receive it. She stepped aside without a word. The hallway smelled the way it always had: Linda's perfume, heavy and floral, worn as long as Alina could remember, and underneath it the faint warmth of something cooked earlier that morning. Alina let it register. Then she moved past it. Everyone was in the living room. Gary in his usual chair by the window, a coffee cup in both hands, elbows on his knees. He looked up when she came in, and then looked back down at the cup. Aaron at the bookcase along the far wall, one hand resting on the shelf, weight slightly back, the posture of someone who hadn't decided yet whether to stay in the room. Victoria crossed to stand beside him. Linda came in from the kitchen doorway and stopped near the entrance, arms loose at her sides. Alina stood in the center of the room and did not sit down. She went through it without raising her voice. The banquet contract, $25,000. Her name as secondary responsible party executed without her knowledge. 3 personal guarantee agreements, tied to private loans, all bearing her information and forged signatures totaling just under $9,000. A deed of trust recorded against her condo in July, $9,000 filed with Multnomah County using a power of attorney she had never signed. Total liability placed in her name without her consent, approximately $43,000. She said it the way she would present a quarterly report, line by line. Linda spoke first with the particular weariness of someone who had rehearsed patience. "We're family," she said. "Aaron needed help. The business is just getting started. They didn't have enough for the wedding they wanted. Couldn't you have helped your own brother?" Victoria's version was cooler. "A practical arrangement," she said. Aaron had suggested Alina's name because Alina had clean credit and a paid-down property. The plan had always been to retire the debt quietly. No one was supposed to be inconvenienced. Aaron said almost nothing. He stood at the bookcase and looked at the floor, and once, just once, he drew in a breath like he was about to say something that came from somewhere real. He got 2 words out. Victoria said his name. 1 word, flat and final. His mouth closed. That was the moment. Not the documents, not the dollar amounts, not even the lien on her condo. The moment Aaron's voice stopped mid-sentence on a single word from the woman standing beside him that was the thing she would carry out of that house. He had, once when they were kids, stepped between her and a group of older boys in a park and told them to back off. She had held on to that version of him for years, long after everything else had buried it. Watching his mouth close like a door being shut from the outside was the last of it going. Linda pivoted. They would handle the banquet balance gradually, she said. The rest could be worked out. No police, no courts. We're family. That phrase had always carried weight. For most of Alina's life, it had been a kind of gravitational pull, the thing that made exits feel wrong, that kept her filling silences and accepting explanations and showing up to doors she hadn't been invited through. It had worked on her reliably for 29 years. She looked at her mother and felt it not work. "Tomorrow morning. I'm going to the precinct," Alina said. "I'll have the banquet contract, the guarantee agreements, the county lien record, and the text thread from March where you asked me to send a photo of my ID. Uncle Victor will be with me. I'm not telling you this to negotiate. I'm telling you so you have the information." Nobody spoke. Gary's coffee cup was still in both hands. He had not looked up once. Alina walked back through the hallway, out the front door and onto the porch. She stood for a moment in the grey morning air, then took the phone from her jacket pocket and stopped the recording. 41 minutes. Clean file, clear audio, full timestamp. She walked to her car and drove back toward Portland. They arrived at the precinct at 9 on Friday morning. The waiting area smelled like burnt coffee from a machine in the corner and the particular heaviness of a room where people spend time they hadn't planned to spend. Victor had called ahead. They were seen within 20 minutes. The detective was in his mid-40s, tired-faced, attentive, the kind of careful that comes from years of listening to things that don't add up and waiting to see which details hold. He shook their hands, let Victor set the evidence package on the desk without comment, and went through it methodically, occasionally setting a page aside to return to it. When he looked up, he asked Alina directly whether she understood that filing this report meant initiating a criminal process that could result in charges against members of her immediate family. "Family ended at the entrance of that venue," she said. "Everything that happens now is the consequence of their choices, not mine." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded and reached for a form. The complaint ran 8 pages. Victor had drafted the language in advance, precise, chronological, not a word that wasn't necessary. Alina read every page before she signed it. Her signature at the bottom of each one, clean and deliberate, the real version, nothing like the copies in the folder on the desk. Outside on the sidewalk afterward, Victor told her the calls would start soon. Her family would ask her to withdraw the report. Guilt first, then pity, then possibly anger. He said this without judgment, the way you describe a weather pattern. She told him she would not withdraw it under any conditions. He said he knew and that he wanted her to hear herself say it out loud anyway. Over the following days, Victor tracked down the notary who had recorded the deed of trust. The notary, once he understood that his own name was attached to a forgery investigation and that his failure to verify the principal's personal presence was part of the record, became cooperative. Aaron and Linda had come to his office in July with a power of attorney already signed and notarized, along with a copy of Alina's ID. He had not required her personal presence because the document appeared properly executed. That power of attorney had been prepared by a second notary earlier in the spring, around the same time Linda had sent the text asking for the photo of her license. Alina had never been in either office. She had never signed anything. The only thing she had contributed without knowing it was a photo sent in under a minute on a Tuesday in March. Aaron called that evening. His voice had dropped like something structural in it had given way. He asked why she was doing this. She told him why the guarantee agreements, the lien $25,000 billed to her name for a wedding she had been turned away from at the door. She said it the same way she had said it in the living room in Beaverton without heat in order. He said it was a family matter. She said the family matter had started when someone walked into the county recorder's office with a forged document. He said Victoria believed it could still be resolved privately, that she knew a notary who could help with the paperwork. Alina told him to let Victoria know that she would be communicating through her attorney and the assigned detective, and that she had no interest in speaking with Victoria or anyone Victoria recommended. Then she said goodbye and hung up. Linda called 3 times that night. Alina let all 3 go to voicemail. In the morning, she read the auto transcripts, long circular cycling through the same points in different orders, and deleted them without responding. Every call that week was really the same call dressed differently each time. Are you still the person who absorbs this quietly and goes home? The answer for the first time was no, and the more they called, the clearer that became, not just to them but to her. A few days later, the detective's office notified Victor and Alina that a formal recorded interview had been scheduled. All parties were being called in. The interview room had a rectangular table, 6 chairs, a wall-mounted camera, and a digital recorder that the detective switched on before anyone had fully settled into their seats. He stated the date, the time, the case number, and the names of everyone present. The room was small enough that Alina could hear her father's chair scrape the floor when he shifted. They were all there. Linda in the burgundy blazer she wore to every formal occasion. Alina had seen it at every school event, every holiday dinner, every moment that required the performance of putting effort in. Gary beside her looking at the table. Aaron in a dark shirt with one collar button open, the way someone dresses when they slept badly and got most of the details right. Victoria, across from Alina, back straight hands, visible expression, settled into something that read as cooperative without committing to anything. The detective worked through it in order. Guarantee agreements, deed of trust, power of attorney. He asked Linda to explain how she had obtained Alina's personal information and whether she had disclosed how it would be used. Linda said they had needed help for Aaron's wedding, that families help each other, that she hadn't expected it to become this kind of situation. When the detective asked specifically about the power of attorney, who had arranged it, who had been present, she paused and then said that Victoria had handled most of the paperwork. A small gesture of her hand in Victoria's direction. Not an accusation, a redirect. Victoria said Alina had been aware of the arrangements and was now choosing to characterize them differently. Victor said without raising his voice, counsel would caution against characterizing the complainant's account as performance, while a forgery analysis is currently part of the active record. Victoria looked at him. Something behind her eyes recalibrated quickly without acknowledgement. The detective set a document on the table. The preliminary handwriting analysis conducted on the signatures on both the power of attorney and the deed of trust had returned a finding that neither signature had been produced by Alina Serrano. Preliminary, he said, but part of the active record to be followed by a final examination. The room went quiet. Victoria's expression didn't break, she was too practiced for that, but something in it thinned, like a signal losing one bar. Then Aaron spoke. He looked at the table, not at Victoria. His voice was unsteady but kept moving. He said he had been at the notary's office in July. He had signed his own name on the deed of trust. But Alina's signature on that document was not hers. Victoria told me it was standard practice, he said. That everyone did it this way. Victoria said his name. He kept going. The detective made a note and turned to Alina. Did she wish to make a statement regarding the banquet contract? She placed both hands flat on the table and spoke clearly enough for the recorder to catch every word. She had driven 45 minutes to a wedding venue on a Saturday evening in September. Her parents had been standing at the entrance. Her mother had told her she was not on the guest list and to go home. She had left. For 3 days, no one in her family had contacted her. On the third day, a coordinator named Karen had called to ask when she planned to pay the remaining balance of $25,000 on a banquet contract bearing her name. She paused. I want it in the record that I am not paying that balance. I did not contract that event. I was not permitted to attend it. I pay only for my own decisions. The detective wrote it down. In the hallway afterward, Linda caught up to her before she reached the exit. Her voice was lower than it had been in the room, and there was something in it that wasn't quite anger, more like the last version of a very old argument making one final attempt. You want to put your own mother away, she said. Is that what you want? Alina stopped and looked at her. The woman who had taught her to tie her shoes on the front steps of the house in Beaverton, who had read to her at night when she was small, who had stood at the entrance of an estate in the Willamette Valley and told her she wasn't welcome in a voice she hadn't bothered to lower. I want you to never be able to sign my name on any document without me standing there, Alina said. That's all I want. Everything else is the consequence of what you chose. She had spent years wanting to be understood by these people. Standing in that hallway under fluorescent lights, with the recorder off and the session finished, she realized she had stopped wanting it. Not bitterly. Just stopped. The way you stop waiting for a train once you've accepted it isn't coming. She walked out through the front door and into the afternoon. What followed took several months and moved through both criminal and civil channels, and not all of it went smoothly or in sequence. The handwriting analysis came back conclusive. The signatures on the power of attorney and the deed of trust had not been made by Alina Serrano. Victor filed a motion to remove the lien, and after a temporary court order and the supporting forensic findings, it came off the county record. The banquet contract was reassigned to Aaron and Linda as the actual contracting parties, a process that required its own legal filing and a response from the venue. Aaron's accounts were frozen as part of the civil claim. Gary and Linda's assets faced partial seizure as security for the judgment, which took additional proceedings to establish. Victoria's criminal exposure was serious, the kind that doesn't get quietly resolved. She had attempted something similar before with her ex-husband Derek Holt in Denver, and that case had collapsed for lack of evidence. This time, the paper trail held, and there was no version of events where her role as the architect of the scheme wasn't visible in the record. Aaron found Alina outside a Max station one afternoon, a few months after the interview. He looked like someone who had been sleeping poorly and had stopped trying to disguise it. He asked if she thought she would ever be able to forgive him. She told him honestly she didn't know. What she did know was that she would never again pay for his decisions, not with money, not with silence, not with the kind of patience that gets mistaken for permission. He nodded. They stood there a moment and then went their separate ways. It was the most honest conversation they'd had in years, and it lasted less than 3 minutes. Some evenings now she sits at the window of her condo with a cup of tea and looks out at the courtyard below. Same building. Same view. The neighbour's cat on the sill across the way, indifferent to everything as always. The mortgage payment clears every month, same as it always has. The lien is gone from the county record. The walls of this place are hers in a way they couldn't quite be before, not because anything changed about the deed, but because she knows now exactly what she is willing to do to keep them. Karen from the venue once asked her, "When do you plan to pay?" The answer is the same today as it was then. She pays only for her own decisions. If someone in your family used your name on a financial document without telling you, and when you confronted them, the first thing they said was, "We're family, what would you have done?"